Hello and welcome back. This time around we are going to add some validation to the to-do item so that I cannot create a to-do with empty owner and empty description. And we're going to show an error pop-up message if I try to create something that is invalid. So let's start with the validation. We're going to do that in the to-do file service. Is this a good place to do it? Well, I have mentioned that I might want to change this out for a database in later iterations, which means that I would have to copy paste the validation part. So maybe this is not a good place to do it. We could put it in the add view model, but we only have the view model here because we're using JavaFX, and if I wanted to use swing or something else later on, maybe a web page, this wouldn't be a good idea either. And I would also have to copy paste it to the update view model because I'm also saving a to-do over here and I don't want duplicate code. So we could do one of two things. Either I make another layer here, and this is I don't know, business logic. Right, so the view model would know about some kind of business logic interface which would validate that whatever I'm doing is okay before we forward the to-do down to the data access here. This might be a bit elaborate, and I'm considering just making a new to-do validation class over here instead to keep the example simple. I think this approach with the new layer here, that would be the correct approach, but that's also going to take some longer time. So if I take my validation and put into a new class, then that's isolated and I can basically use this from anywhere. So before the to-do service is saving the to-do, we can just call the validation and ask if it's okay. Then it's done in one place rather than I could of course call it from the add view model and the edit view model. They could both know about a to-do validation, but then I would have to have it in two places. Lots of considerations to do. Let's start by making the class. It should go somewhere, maybe a new package. Let's make a new package. Let's call it validation. We create a class here. Maybe I want an interface first. Maybe I have different validations at some point for the to-do class. So interface, to-do logic, and we need a public what do we return? Well, I guess I want to return nothing and instead throw exceptions. Is that a good idea? We'll see about that. Provide validate to do. It takes a to do to validate like that. Okay, let's create the class for it. To do logic simple, and we implement the interface, which means we have to override the method. And here we say if to do, well, if the owner is null or the owner is empty, then we want to throw a new exception, throw a new runtime exception, runtime exception. Owner cannot be empty. Okay, if the to-do description get text is null, is there a string null empty? There's no method on the no. In C# you have a method on the static method on the string to check if something is null or empty, so I don't have to write this out, but we can manage get text. Throw new runtime exception, description. I should have renamed this text to description, but we'll do that at a later point perhaps. Description cannot be empty. Like that. And am I missing a parenthesis? Like that. Yep. So if it passes these two checks, then everything is okay. Then let's say that the to-do file service here, it needs a to-do logic, and we want to put that as a create field. And now it's complaining. So in the model factory where we create the to-do file service, it's now requiring me to do the to pass in a to-do logic. I could of course create a new factory. We are sort of having this layer here. Should I have a logic factory? Let's do that. Logic factory. It can public to-do logic, get to-do logic, like that. Return new to-do logic. Okay, this one. Well, my model factory then needs to know about the to-do logic. Model. Maybe this should have been called data access factory, but you know, basic approach, everything below the view models are just called model, whether it adds stuff to the database or validates stuff or whatever. So we are grouping a bunch of stuff together in what we call the model. Let's just say here we need what do we need? We need a private to-do logic. No, we need a private logic factory, and we need a constructor for that. Not what I wanted. Constructor logic factory. So here we can say logic factory get to do logic, and I don't have, well, I'm using a different constructor when I create things here. So let's say logic factory f equals new logic factory, like that. Okay, it's getting more and more intricate. Well, that's interesting. So we have a logic factory, and that is also instantiated by that one. And come on. And my model factory knows about the logic factory. And that one creates this one. And I have a package here called logic. No. Validation. Let's call it logic instead. Logic. Like that. No, I don't think I like this approach. No, I want the layers to be done correctly. So I want, well, this is going to be a major rework. This one here is going to be called data access factory. This one here is going to be, no, sorry, logic factory. Okay. We'll just rearrange this. So I want my layers to be in the correct place. So we have and this arrow, where does it go? This one. Okay, so the data access factory creates that interface. And what do we have here? I'm going to need to remove some of these arrows. Put to back. Send to back, okay. So let's just clean up these arrows here. Data access, you don't go there, no. Okay. Validation. And I need an interface for that one. Not like a lollipop, a real interface. We will call it to-do logic, like that. And I need that arrow. And so we're getting close, and they need to know about this one. So okay, so now the idea is that, well, that's annoying. My ViewModels wants to do something with the to-do. They might want to delete something or create something or update something, and that has to be approved by this class here. Can you delete something? Maybe you are not allowed to delete something if you're not allowed to delete a to-do that is not completed. And that would be too easy. If I have a to-do saying do the dishes and I don't want to do that, I'm just deleting the task and saying yep, that's done. And maybe your spouse won't like that approach. So this one here will tell you whether you are allowed to do what you want to do with your to-dos. To do. This one here is just responsible for saving and storing the data. So ViewModel factory, it goes down there. We're going to need a larger rework. So maybe this part is not called show a pop-up. We'll see how far we get. Maybe this part is instead called restructuring, adding logic. So let's get to work. Let's see if we can modify this here without breaking everything. Well, the to-do logic basically needs the same methods as the to-do service. So do I need a to-do logic interface? I could obviously just cheat and reuse the existing to-do service interface. That seems potentially dangerous. So instead I'm just going to, what if you mess up and say this one wants a to-do validation, but this one accidentally get a to-do file service? If they share the same to-do interface, then we could delete stuff here and circumvent the validation part. So to-do logic, we're going to make it look like the to-do service interface. And what kind of problem do we have? Well, we're just going to override that. This one here, we comment that out for now. So this class here, that's my to-do logic impl. Let's rename it to-do logic impl. And it's going to need a to-do service. So let's say private to-do service. To-do service. I want to rename that to data access. To-do data access, because that's what we're actually doing. And so let's rename it F6 to-do data access. Yeah, let's see how much that breaks. Okay, to-do data access. Fine. I need a constructor for that, like that. Okay. I need to put up my factories again correctly, so I have a logic factory. The logic factory should know about a data access factory. So let's rename that. Instead of model factory, call it data access factory. It does not know about the logic factory, and the data access nothing is the bottom one, so it doesn't know about anything. This one doesn't go there. This is going to create a bunch of errors. Where do we fix that first? The logic factory should instead know about a private data access factory, and we pass it a to-do service, but we should rename this one to be get to-do data access instead, because it's not get to-do data access. And this one here, the to-do file service, shouldn't get anything. It doesn't know about the logic. And then we need to put things together correctly in the start method here. To do app, we have a logic factory. I'll just swap these around. This one doesn't know about anything, but that one knows about something. The logic factory, that needs the data access. Data access factory. Right. Yeah, I need a constructor for this one. Constructor, like that. so it's set. Can be made final, whatever. My ViewModel factory needs to know about the logic factory. So I should have planned ahead initially and assumed that I would need some kind of logic, but we're doing iterative approaches here. So it doesn't know about the data access factory. My ViewModel factory knows about the logic factory. Logic factory, we call logic factory. We need a logic factory, and logic factory, and this. Now my ViewModels instead need to get an instance of to-do logic. If I had just used the same TodoService interface for both of them, it would have been easy. I wouldn't have to modify these up here, but well, the to-do logic interface promises one thing. The to-do access data access interface promises another thing, even though the methods are the same. This one here is about storing data and retrieving. This one here is about validating data, so I do want to have separate interfaces. Logic factory, get to do logic. Like that, like that, like that. That's going to require me to modify all my ViewModels. This one here knows about a to-do logic. And let's rename that to-do logic. Yep. And to-do logic. Okay, now because the methods are the same, I can still I don't have to modify the method calls here, so at least that's a good start. Let's find the other ViewModels. This was the list ViewModel. This one here is going to require the same. It's a to-do logic. To-do logic. Okay. TodoService. Yeah. The list ViewModel, that's modified. This one here needs to be modified as well. Okay, that's the last one. To do logic. This one here, we rename that to do logic. Yes. And we want that and that. Okay, back on track. Let's just build it to see if I have forgotten any modifications. What's going on here? Nothing. Maybe that's good. So that went fast. Maybe take a break and check out the GitHub to see the changes. But the point is, we now have separated some logic into a new layer, and everything has to go through that layer before it can get stored. So modifying your data will be validated first. Okay. Let's see if it still works. Obviously it doesn't, because I have a bunch of empty methods in my to-do file, no to-do logic implementation. So a to-do, well, I have a to-do data access, so to-do data access, add to-do. So we're just making method forward calls here, That seems a bit boring initially. Just to have it working again as we had before. Delete by ID. I cannot delete anything yet, but get all. And finally, to do data access get by ID. We'll implement the delete functionality a bit later. So we need to do this here. Let's take that and copy in here. Okay, so if you want to add a to-do, we first validate everything and then we add it. If you want to update a to-do, obviously you have to do the same validation. You cannot remove the owner and you cannot remove the text. So that should also be okay. It works. Is it a good approach? Well, there's a rule of thumb that says don't repeat yourself. Dry in software development. And I just forgot to open my keystroke highlighter, but basically it means if I have duplicate code, well, that's going to cause problems. At some point I might want to validate or add some more logic for the to-do. Maybe it's not enough that it cannot be empty. Maybe the owner has to exist in the database. Maybe have a different file with users, and we have to validate that the owner that you're inserting actually exists. So obviously that requires a modification here, it requires a modification here. So I need to maintain the same code twice, and that is very error prone. I will forget one place and update the other, and then the next time I will forget the other place and update the first. So I want to extract this into a new method. Control Alt M, and let's call it validate to do, like that. And it actually finds identical code. So do I want to replace this also? Yes, I do. And now we just have the validation in one place. And if I want to modify it, I just have to modify one place. Obviously that's a good idea. I can now remove this. Delete. Let's just if to do dot. Oh, first I have to get it. Okay. So let's say get ID. That's going to return to me a to do. And if to do is null, let's see. Maybe, oh, that was not it. Okay, if we don't find anything, so it cannot be null. I cannot get null here, so I don't have to check for that. If instead the get completed is false, so if it is not completed, then I cannot delete it. Throw new runtime exception, cannot delete uncompleted to do. Right, we're just making validation stuff up here. It doesn't really matter. I could add other things. These two, there's no validation to get something. That doesn't really require anything. Okay, let's see. Now we should see if it can work. New to do owner. Well, if I try to add something here, I should just get printed out. Let's see, a stack trace, because I don't really handle my exceptions in any way. But we don't get anything added. There's no new. Okay, so the validation at least prevents that I'm creating invalid to-dos. Whether it's preventing in a good way, well, not really, because the user of your system is not going to run your program through IntelliJ, so they won't see the stack trace here. What do we need to do? Fix pop-up. Do I have? Maybe I have one already. Okay, so that went through. Edit. Let's just see if I can edit something. Fix pop-up 1. Save. Yeah. Pet the dog. I just did that. Do the dishes. I did that yesterday. Okay. So I think I'm going to stop the video here, and then in the next video we'll do the pop-up. This is going, we've spent 30 minutes already, and I completely did something else than I originally had thought. So that's what happens when you don't plan ahead. This was instead about refactoring, so we have a better structure in the program, and making sure that the code that we add has a specific place where it makes sense, where it belongs. So I don't have to put code in the data access class here, because if I swap out with a different one to go for the database, I would have to copy paste all the validation stuff. If I put it in the ViewModels, I would also have to copy paste validation stuff and maintain it in multiple places. I could have made a utility class that they both have access to, but well, you could, if you make a new view model, maybe you forget to call that validation. So instead, the intention is you have to go through the to-do logic interface. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here, and next time we're going to talk about the pop-up. Thank you for watching.